Good afternoon, Bahamas, and welcome
Welcome to the Hit Back. I'm your host, Nahaja Black. It is a beautiful day here in the 242. We hope you're doing well,
taking care of yourself, living your best life today.
today.
I hope that everyone is doing whatever they need to do. Well, whatever. This is a stretch, right? Whatever you need to do. I hope you guys are doing your best to live your best life today. Coming to you live from Guardian Radio Studios. I got a special guest joining us. We've got a lot of things to talk about today. But before we get into, some of the pressing matters, I don't know if you guys have been following some of the pressing matters that has been going on around the world. So the global supply chain, anyone remember when owner of SuperValue, Rupert Roberts, started talking about, what was it? How, there's going to be a supply chain issue, how food prices were going to get more expensive coming into the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Thanksgiving and Christmas are here, and he is proving to be quite accurate. And it wasn't something that's like a secret. It isn't something that, we kind of, those who understand supply chain wouldn't be surprised or, would be surprised by. So that's something that I think is very important to discuss, because he anticipated that there would be an increase in cost overall to us as Bahamians. Overall costs would increase, and that's something that's very important. How does that fashion or factor into what we are hoping to have done, right? Well, how does that factor into a lot of what we would like to do? Right?
A lot of what we would like to do in terms of getting
the economy moving. How is that affecting supplies in terms of,
I got a lot of sound in the back. Let me find a zero bar. And see if I can take some of this background noise away from me.
Sorry, it's just me, April. So, that is something I think is a very important, something of note, something that is a big storyline to talk about. Also, and so joining me to talk about that, because we also have to talk about, now that the speech is done, now that all the pageantry is done, now that we're over all of the, this is who's the minister, this is who's that, this is who's the next. Now that we're past those things, the question then becomes, what's next? What's now? What are we doing now? How does that help us today? And that's really the question that, we want to get folks really interested in and keen and aware of, right? So I think when we have all of this going on, okay, I'll fix that. When we have all of this going on, that is where you have to pay attention, right? We have to pay attention. And I am wondering if the government will start to have a real conversation on the new costs that is being associated with us, with this supply chain issue. That's one thing. The second thing is I got some messages saying, okay, well, now the government has decided to take a few weeks off, right? You remember one of the criticisms of the last administration, and now which will be a criticism of this administration, is the entire conversation of now this government is not going to be in Parliament. And thank you, everyone who's listening online. This government will be like, they're going to enter into Parliament, and they won't start Parliament work. They won't get into the House until October 27th. And the question is, why? Why are we waiting to get to work? Now, this is where the questions come in, and I think it's a good question to have as well, and to have a good answer for it. What do you go to the House for, right? You go to the House to legislate. Now, what I asked was, there must be some things you could do in that interim. Now, what has been told to us is that, hey, listen, the House of Assembly is going through repairs. And so it will not be finished with construction, reconstruction until closer to that time. All right. So then I asked the question, so what are we doing in the 2 to 3 weeks whilst we're waiting for repairs? And I was told, well, all of the ministers are in their office and they are looking around. We had another walkabout, another tour today, which is all good and well. But I'll tell you who I want to hear from. I don't know about y'all, but I'm very much interested on hearing from my Minister of Investments and Tourism and Investments, Chester Cooper, and from my Minister now of Economic Affairs, Mr. Halkitis. Then I'll hear from the Minister of Finance, who really is just now, based on the other jobs or ministries, is just making sure the money is accounted for there and being able to receive it and send it. That's all I'm getting from it. But at this point, ladies and gentlemen, like we knew there was going to be no honeymoon, like we knew there was going to be no time for, because this is what the government promised. They promised they were ready day one. Saying, I could hear you saying, well, Nahaja, come on, man, give them a break. No, no breaks. No breaks. Why no breaks? Because now we're in crisis. When we gave breaks, when we allow, I want substantive. I don't think it's asking. I need now a conversation. And I'm hoping that conversation starts next week, where we are given, and I was told that there will be press conferences next week. So even though they're not in the House of Assembly, I'm looking for work, right? Yes, you have to know and maneuver through your ministry. I get that. You have to know where the paperwork is. I get that. But it's been 21 days today. And I would hope this is why you don't oversell. You say you're ready to govern day one. The few things that I like what the government has done, they've been quick to get through the process of this level of pageantry. They've been quick to give you all. I mean, my God, they knew. Seemed like they knew already how many people were going to be in this cabinet, and where they were going to move folk. Fine, that's fine with me. All right, I am not even going to criticize too much right now the size of that government, because you must be able to count the cost if you're going to hire all of those people. You must have done the math to understand the cost of all of those folks. You must have calculated the cost to understand the size of the cabinet can cause some challenges when it comes to decision-making, leadership, etc. You must have counted the cost when you decided that you were going to, you have to take these 3 weeks after all of the opening of Parliament and then all of that stuff, that you were going to have to make sure that the Bahamian people are following along with you. That's it. This isn't, there's no more. We are in a financial crisis where, and I use the word crisis because I remember using it the last time and they would say, no, crisis, you're using levels of hyperbole. It's no crisis. Oh, it's just, what was some of the wording? And I can't wait to bring my guest on, but I have to make sure his camera and everything is sorted out. But there was this, what was the word? Debt spiral. They were comfortable more with debt spiral, but they didn't want to hear a debt, like, the debt crisis. They didn't want to hear that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, when we are 100% or very close to debt to GDP, we are not, there's no time for smooth talking or trying to make people comfortable. There needs to be a level of critical urgency. If you go in to the hospital needing critical care, stat, you are bleeding and that is causing shock. How you getting your levels are elevated. Your heart is racing. They are in fear that you're going into cardiac arrest. You know what they don't say? It ain't that bad. They start talking to you in doctor speak. Oh, no. You know what? Get them to the ER statin. They start talking all kind of 23 cc's. I don't know. I just watch too much TV. But what I will tell you is that the heightened level of anxiety is there, but it's never out of control. What it is knowing that we are in a different place or space, and it requires different levels of energy with intentional attention and focus. So I never want a physician who seems like he's hyper and doesn't know what they're doing. No, we don't ever want that. I don't want to roll into the hospital and the doctor starts freaking out, holding his head and calls for the nurse. No, what you want is for control, even in high anxiety, high stress situations. This is a high stress situation. We are in the critical wing of our finances and our economy, and that requires some very intentional, specific, and high energy attention. It does not allow for us to meander in the lobby whilst the economy is bleeding out. It does not allow for us to meander or talk or get tea. It doesn't allow for you to put on all your clothes. It requires immediate attention, especially if you realize this may be a triage event, especially if you realize that your economy is having one issue here, another issue there, another issue over here. 3 weeks not in the house should not be 3 weeks not working. And I'm hopeful that they are working. Now what needs to be done is to show us that you are working. And how do you show us? You get us involved. Now, I trust me, I'm totally over the tours. I'm fully over all of the walking through buildings and having the press see you. I think that's just buying time. That to me isn't low hanging fruit. That isn't low hanging fruit. To me, that's just buying time, showing us that you showed up to work today. That I don't need. What I need now is, after you tell me that the walls are painted, Chip is painting in a building that ain't ours, at road traffic, I don't understand the point. What I need you to find out now is, how do we save money by getting out of spaces that aren't government owned? How do we start to save money when we talk about healthcare? Where do we find the funds from? I mean, I appreciate Dr. Darvel walking through the hospital. I appreciate him finding out what is different about the hospital today. But the critical issues of the hospital are not new, especially, I would think, to a former health minister. They've just been exacerbated with time and lack of attention. So now, how do we resolve this? This is the challenge of saying you're ready day one, because you are with this blueprint for change. The government will not get a break. That was the pageantry of 3 weeks. We now have work to do. I want to welcome my guest, but before I do, Kermit, let me take a quick break, because I want to welcome my guest, Dr. Gilbert Morris, who's joining me. We have a lot of questions. I always like to bring Dr. Morris on because, one, his mindset, his thinking is one that is beyond the space we're in. You always, when you're in critical situations, you need someone whose mind isn't in the trouble. It's the person, when they say, if you're in the forest, you can see the forest for the trees. And I have this analogy in my mind, Dr. Morris, where I say to myself, if I'm in the forest for myself, right? If I'm in the forest with a bunch of people, I don't just want the person who knows we're in the forest. I want the person who said, not only do I know we're in the forest, but I have been the one that orchestrated the layout of the forest. I have planted the trees, or I have seen the topography before we arrived, and I understand the exits. And I think that's where we need to be with folks who are able to say, listen, I understand this terrain. I'm not just going to be the one who says I got the most muscles. I want someone who knows the terrain. And that's why we bring on Dr. Gilbert Morris, because his mind is definitely further ahead than many of us in terms of the global space and his studies. So we'll be back. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. I want to bring back Dr. Gilbert Morris. Let's talk about this. A supply chain crisis, a lot of the promises from the speech from the throne, from an economic standpoint. Our purpose every day is to give the government as much help as they can. And then when they stop listening, then you mash them up. That's the goal. You got to let them know we are here. We're paying attention. We'll be back right after this.
The Water and Sewage Corporation advises the public and its customers that the corporation will commence improvement works on Bamboo Boulevard, South Beach East, beginning Friday, September 3rd, 2021, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. daily for a period of 8 weeks. During this time, there may be some interruption in water supply and traffic flow around the work area. The corporation apologizes for any inconvenience caused.
Beulah gal, can you believe this? We are now the patrol queens of the neighborhood.
We now large and in charge. So we need to check out what's going on in everybody's yard. What about that gun that we know that Junior and his homeboys just ran out? Can we report that too?
Of course we can.
But we could be in deep trouble if they find out.
We need to report what we see, Beulah. When you call Crime Stoppers, they just answer your call in Miami.
So then we can report everything? Guns, where they hiding the drugs, who shoot who part of which gang, or who disturbing the peace with the loud music and the motorcycles.
Then our neighborhood will be the best in the Bahamas, and everybody gonna want to come live here. And then our house price will go up, gal.
So what we waiting on? What's the number?
If you see something, say something. Let us all pitch in and stop the crime before it's your time. Call 328-8477 from Nassau or 242-300-8477 from the Family Islands, or text us through the Crack Crime Bahamas app. Stop the crime before it's your time.
You have a new text message from Scotia.
Scotiabank is adding text messaging to its communication channels to keep customers updated in quicker and safer ways. As of November 4th, Scotiabank will be using text messaging to provide notifications on the minimum payment required for your credit card and due dates. Customers may continue to access their credit card statements on Scotia Online or through our mobile banking app. Learn more by contacting customer care-Bahamas at scotiabank.com or call 356-1697.
You invest in your children, your home, and your community. But are you investing in your financial future? At CFAO, we specialize in investment management, retirement planning, mutual funds, and private wealth management. Our team of experts never stops helping you plan for tomorrow. Because tomorrow begins today. Call us at 502-7010 to see what our financial advisors can do for you. CFAO, growing wealth for future generations.
It's the hit back with Natasha Black. It's the hit back with Natasha Black. It's the hit back with Natasha Black. It's the hit back with Natasha Black.
And we're back. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. Special guest joining us today, the one and only Professor Gilbert Morris. I want to thank everyone who is joining us online. And of course, we've got Switzerland, Doc. We've got New Zealand. No, is it New Zealand? No, sorry. The Netherlands. We've got Canada, States. We've got a good audience that follows online. Even London. So shout out to.
I do. There's a group of Bahamians in Estonia and another group in
Really?
Hong Kong. Yeah, in Hong Kong that listens along, and a vast group in Canada.
Yeah, well, look here.
That,
We got Hong Kong group too. That's
yeah,
actually
yeah.
pretty impressive.
Yeah. No. It's Shane Stewart and the whole crew out there. So.
Oh, well, hello, Shane, and to the
yes.
crew out there, right?
Absolutely, yes.
It's such a pleasure, Dr. Gilbert Morris. Always a pleasure to have you, Doc. How you been?
It's great to see you. Traveling a little bit too much.
Yeah.
I've been stationary for most of the pandemic,
Yes,
but now
that's rare.
I've done maybe 7 countries in the last 4 weeks.
7 in the last 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so then let's talk, Doc. You would be then, for those who are unfamiliar, I don't know how folks are unfamiliar with the great Gilbert Morris, but professor of law, econometrics, economics. You have your doctor's degree in
Right.
economics, etc.
Right.
So, and so many others. You've author,
Right.
consultant,
Right.
on and on.
Right.
Right. And so what makes it such a great conversation every time? And plus you're my mentor, right? Just let it be known. I got economy questions, economic questions I call on Doc, right? What has been going on now, Doc? There's a lot of things going on. Obviously, we understand that the world is challenged financially. Some places more so than others.
Yeah.
In particular, Caribbean, our island nation states, we are challenged. We are going to the IMF more because of COVID.
Right.
The Bahamas has seen its own share of a double whammy, its own challenges, Dorian, and then COVID-19. So we understand that there is a different we're in a different world in terms of financial standing, where we once were. Are most places where they were before. Now, what we do know, Doc, is that there are some countries that have done better,
Yes.
right? Who somehow figured out a plan or charted a course.
Absolutely.
And then you get hit. We are now looking at something where I don't think a lot of us understand what's going on, what's happening before us.
Right.
And that is the supply chain, the global supply chain shock, right?
Yeah.
And for those who for many who aren't following, because a lot of people just don't follow it, it isn't stuff we follow. We don't understand what the supply chain is. We don't understand any of this. How does it affect us? Can you break it down for us, Doc? What is going on?
Yes, let's get some framing. One of the things that I've said to, and I've probably spoken to 30 or 40 governments. In fact, a new thing is blown up where on Sundays I find myself in Zoom meeting with cabinets, in the region and beyond, talking to them about this issue. During COVID, you'll remember you were one of the first programs in January of 2020. I came on and made several forecasts and so on, maybe about 12 of them over the first 3 months of COVID. I'm sad to say that all of them have been confirmed independently one way or the other. And I decided to write a book about it. So that's the upper level framing. The second point that I make to governments and agencies when I speak to them is that pandemics have little to do with medicine. They say, well, what is an economist doing speaking so
I remember that.
forcefully about pandemics? Well, first, my graduate research is actually in neuroscience and brain science from the 14th to the 17th century. And so it's the study of how medical science moved from mysticism, religion, and occultism to a scientific methodology. So my work in economics began because I'm a methodologist. And econometrics is the study of social systems and their methodologies and so on. And pandemics are concerned with the measuring of social methodologies, right? So you have to understand demographics, logistics, population displacement. And so when we start talking about disease spread, economists who are accustomed to seeking out inflation, because inflation moves, in this way, in waves and cascades and things like that. You have undulating inflation and so on. You're taught to track inflation using probabilistic statistical methods. And the same thing is true about the spread of pandemics. So you'd have heard me talk about things like pattern and flow, Fibonacci patterns and so on, and talk about proportionality constants and that kind of thing. These are all bearings on that. So your audience listening to that, they don't have to understand any of that. That's just, I'm just explaining the framing. And so what that means is when you're dealing with a pandemic, the thing you want is to establish pattern and flow. So you have 400,000 people in the Bahamas, let's just say. That would mean you need around 1.6 million to 2.4 million tests.
That's a lot of tests.
Yes.
And that's to cover for how long?
You need over 10 weeks.
That's only 10 weeks.
Yeah. So you need to break the population into different groups, and then you need to test everyone 3 to 4 times, depending on their risk.
Why?
Because the rapid tests have about a 65% efficacy and accuracy reading, and you need to offset and create redundancies. When you do the first test, you get a pattern. When you do the second set of tests, you set that pattern on top of the other, and you'll begin to see flow. So you've got pattern, now you have pattern and flow. The third test will be the mean between the three tests. And then the fourth test should give you some clear establishment of where things are going. Now, that's not the end of things. What that does is gives you a really good sense of where the disease is in the country. And then you can now make real decisions, because you can begin to see where the disease is trending, how it is trending, where it is spreading, the people who are infected, what are their age groups, what are their underlying comorbidities, and so on. Now you're making, because the disease is spreading exponentially, and the pernicious nature of COVID-19 is that it has asymptomatics and super spreaders. And so while the flu is, I think, 1 to 2, 1 to 3. COVID-19 is actually, in normal cases, about 1 to 2, but the super spreader can be 1 to 50, right?
Yeah,
So
that was the police force at the early part of
right,
this, right?
absolutely, yeah. So it's a gorilla. You're
Mhm.
precisely right. And so, even if you have a vaccine program, it's arithmetical because it's one person putting a thing in somebody's arm. If you wait to test people who come in and complain that they have the symptoms, that person could have spent 10 days infecting other people.
And this is to the narrative of, if you're just tuning in, Professor Gilbert Morris, but this is to the
Right.
narrative of how do we fix it,
Right.
right?
Yes.
But I wanted to find out, Doc,
right.
because I know you've mentioned that before on the show. What I want to find out, though, is now we are now in a world where our Western brothers and sisters, the United States, is working to be open,
Yes.
right? And a lot of countries such as ours are looking at ways to open, and this is what you're talking about, this cycle, right?
Right.
But we're already open. So now
Yeah.
how do you live in this can't start from zero world?
I'm going to give you 3 things. So take everything I said before. That is a descriptive characterization of what we are caught in. That you have to learn, unlearn, and relearn everything you know about the disease, because our normal method is to say, hey man, I dealt with that.
Mhm.
And then you turn around and go the other way. Not this disease.
Mhm.
Not anything really,
Mhm.
but certainly not this disease.
Right.
Right. And so I wanted to give your audience a sense of teeming pressure and cascades that this is dealing with. And if you do one thing wrong, you're so earnest, you're helping people, they're coming in, they're saying, I think I've got the symptoms. You're working overtime, but you're making a mistake
Mhm.
because you're working arithmetically in a disease that's spreading exponentially.
Mm.
Right.
Mhm.
And that'll never work because you have tidal cascades that come over. And so you end up with facilities triage.
So the
And-
waves, what you're saying.
Yeah,
when you say tidal-
absolutely.
tidal
Yes.
cascades,
And that's why you
meaning the
keep
waves.
having waves. Add to that the variants. And I wrote this paper called Variants and Vaccines.
Mhm.
And you're in trouble. We allowed ourselves to get pulled into this discussion of vaccinated and unvaccinated and who is a patriot and who isn't because they're vaccinated or unvaccinated. This is all nonsense talk.
Mhm.
Vaccinations don't help you to open the economy. Vaccinations don't stop
we've
the
seen
spread.
that.
Vaccination, they stop you from getting sick,
Mhm.
very sick, and they stop you from taking up space in the hospital. Those are the only 2 things we know.
That's it.
All right. There's a study just recently done where every week they're tracking the immunity coverage. I think it's in Malta. And some people's immunity coverage has fallen down to 20%,
Mhm.
right? Who are doubly vaccinated.
And we're watching countries like Singapore at 80%.
Right.
Increasing.
Israel is another
Israel,
one. Absolutely.
So
So all that is to say, there's no knockout solution.
exactly.
There's no you
Because we're seemingly waiting for this.
Yeah.
Everyone gets vaccinated. We
the
can open the
only
economy.
solution is you have to be very, very smart.
Mm.
That's it. Now, having said that, let me come to your issues. I said in one of my forecasts that more people will die from the impact of COVID-19 than from COVID-19.
Hmm.
So COVID-19 is killed, depending on estimates and what we understand about the numbers in Africa and these kinds of things. Just it's under 5 million people in total.
Mhm.
All right. But more than 1 billion people are food insecure and are put at distress. And we don't know what the numbers are for the deaths
Mhm.
that have been put in peril because of the supply chain collapse.
Mhm.
So what we found about the global economy is that a single package, there are nodes that packages move around the world every day, where that package is actually in a nexus that could go to any country in the world.
Mhm.
It's communicative, complex, means that it touches any country in the world, it can go there. That's a fairly complex and comprehensive system. It turns out that complex and comprehensive systems are incredibly fragile, right? So the global infrastructure and the system by which we connect the world is comprehensive and even efficient. But what we're seeing is the higher the efficiency, all right, the more efficient it is, the more fragile it is.
The more, so we're talking just in the pure logistics of movement
Right.
of things. You're
Yes,
saying
absolutely.
that the more efficient, the more
Yeah.
streamlined
Right,
it is,
right.
that if one thing gets kicked out,
Absolutely.
then we see a
Then we
beginning.
see a big problem.
Yeah.
And one of the things, so you can see now, people have been talking about one of the impacts of COVID has been the problem of shipping, and then the problem also of price rises.
Mhm.
People have called this inflation. It's not inflation. It's a supply side shock. There's no monetary issue, and demand is the same. Right?
Interesting.
Demand is the same. The problem is we can't get the supplies out. Why is that? So, for instance, the boats that are the cargo vessels that are piled up off of San Francisco or California in general, why are they piled up there? Number one, lots of the businesses that facilitated them went out of business, right? Number two, many of the people who work there were from Mexico or Guatemala, and at the beginning of COVID, they were sent home. Now you can't get them back. Number three, a lot of the companies that did the rollover financing and so on, those companies also went out of business or are having financial trouble because one of the impacts of the pandemic is that people have chosen, or companies have allowed people to work from home. The office center, so companies like Brookfield that owns Atlantis, is writing down significant assets and so on because they were one of the dominant players in big office buildings.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. I said at the beginning of the pandemic that universities will be completely different, and something close to 40% of the world's universities will collapse economically. Absolutely. And university
Of
towns
course, right? There are no students
will
in
suffer.
there.
Students
Buildings
can't
have to pay.
attend.
Yeah.
Right? So students can't attend. That means that the town that was built up around the university,
Wow, that's a great
right,
point.
that
They
town
suffered.
is going to suffer.
Mhm.
Moreover, in 1996, when I was chairman of the technology across the curriculum program at George Mason at the time, so we were just implementing technology. It was dial-up because America Online was right there.
Right.
And we had something called Town Hall. I don't know if you remember that early technology, right? It's like remembering Atari, to be honest with you, right? Or Commodore 64, right? You're young.
Yeah, no.
So,
Commodore 64. Like that's a dance.
Yeah. So one of the problems we had in those days, the connection didn't stay. Pictures were really jinky and so on, and it was buggy, right? This pandemic has found things like Zoom. You got Skype.
Yep.
You got Microsoft Teams.
Yes.
You got, God, it's just unlimited,
Everything.
right? And that's
Streaming
just
on,
the
yep.
Western ones. You get all sorts of Korean ones, South Korean ones, and and so on. So what professors have found is that you can actually mark a PhD thesis right down to the grammar and punctuation online. Right, in an app. You can do it online, and universities are finding that they have higher levels of productivity with lower costs, with no one on campus. All right,
Exactly.
and if you're a university with a high value brand, you have greater reach all over the world.
Very good point.
Right, I one of the things that I do in my work is assist colleagues of mine who are applying for presidencies of universities. And one of the universities, very popular one in Atlanta, that a colleague of mine who won the Pulitzer Prize in 2019 was applying for, one of the things we were able to show them is that we could actually triple your student body, because this is a famous university. And in places like Africa and the Caribbean, if people have the opportunity to attend this university, then, they would. Now that produces another problem. One of the things you're going to find with domestic universities is that if Harvard University is available online, And they have the Paris University of Paris model. They say in University of Paris everyone gets in, but only 16% get out.
Oof.
So there's no entrance requirement. You can get
You
in.
can get in.
So it's kind of a chic thing to say, "Oh, I attended University of Paris, but I didn't finish."
It's
Right?
a thing.
It's a thing, right? And so what's really significant about that, though, economically, is that the money from many of these national universities is going to dry up because their students are going to elect for those big universities that are offering now diploma and certificate courses
Yes.
online,
Yes.
because they say, well, if I'm in Vanuatu and I can go to the Vanuatu, university, but I can go to Cambridge University online and get a graduate diploma. Why would I go to
Of course, I'm
to
going
Vanuatu? All right.
Cambridge,
Not
yes.
to say anything bad about Vanuatu. After all, they're at the bottom of the alphabet. But here's the thing. It's very, very important to understand these impacts. So what you have now, a container from China used to be around $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
It's approaching $16,000 now, in some cases, almost $20,000.
Wow.
And again, it's because the availability of the companies, the facilitation of the global supply chain, how we get supplies from manufacturers to wholesalers to and
Yes.
ship, to different institutions and places around the world. That has become prolix and very, very difficult now. And it doesn't look like there's going to be in any way a sort of, we're not at the apex of this as yet.
Wow. Hold
And
on.
You're going to feel that in your prices in the food stores in places
See,
like the
and
Bahamas.
that's where we go with
Yes.
this conversation. Dr. Gilbert Morris joining us on the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. What concerns me with that, Doc, is that you said we're not at the apex of it,
No,
right? We're
no.
not. So that means that we still have more to go. And I'm
Yes.
curious. I was watching CNN last night, and the harbor master, they said they had about 55 containers out to sea, parked
Right.
out,
Container vessels.
container vessels, right,
Yeah.
out to sea,
Yeah.
waiting to offload.
Right.
Truckers are waiting 9 hours
Right.
to get these goods, and folks would be like, okay, but that's in San Francisco. What does it
Right.
have to do? That's not Florida. That's
Right.
not here.
Well, think about it. Your goods come through the Panama Canal from the Far East.
Mhm.
They pass through the Windward Passage or the Florida Strait. So they either go up around Cayman and Grand Bahama and Havana, or they go down at the bottom of Cuba through between Cuba and Haiti through the Windward Passage, past Turks and Caicos, Maguana, and up to the port of New Jersey, because there's no break bulk facility in the Caribbean. I know because I did the study on that for Madam Wu, right? So it gets to New Jersey, and then you have to truck it down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And then we go to Florida and we buy the goods, and then we have to pay double freight because the container ship goes back empty.
Wow.
So we actually pay both ways, right? Because we have nothing to export.
That's right.
So you have something like a 26% premium in there that is just shipping
Just
costs.
shipping costs.
Absolutely. And this is going to get worse because in New Jersey and all the way down through the chain, you have problems now with companies with their rollover financing, with companies that have been on mothball for a year or 9 months or something like that during the pandemic, and the emoluments which were given by the U.S. government were insufficient to see them through. And now Biden is trying to do something about that in these new bills that he's fighting with Christian Sinema and Joe Manchin about, and people are not getting what. And this is the thing that I felt speaking to governments in the Caribbean region and speaking to force. I was in Washington D.C. a week ago, speaking to very high-level persons on the Economic Council, and one of the things I realized is they don't understand what's happening. And I felt myself at a loss to explain the urgency without seeming like an alarmist, right? And the point I was trying to make to them is, look here, this is unlike anything you've ever experienced. If you're trying to re-knit together 2019, you're lost, absolutely lost.
2019 is gone
It's the whole world
from
that belonged to 2019,
since
from
then.
the origin of human life to 2019. That's
Consider
gone.
that done.
Yeah. The next 3 years are going to be radically different than the last 300.
Wow.
All right. And so you have one of the things I'd petition for is for Expo in Dubai, because we haven't had a global summit on the pandemic, and there are lots of things floating around. So some countries have vaccines, some don't. Pfizer's going around harassing countries and telling them they have to give up their airports and ports if they want free vaccines.
Oh, wow.
All right. So that's happening. Then you have a situation where the Africans are saying, no, we prefer antiviral drugs. Everyone condemned them and called them backwards. Now in the West, everyone's trying to get
That's
a
right.
pill or antiviral drugs.
That's right.
So the Africans were right in the first place.
Yep.
Senegal, places like that, they were doing these kinds of things. Brazil as well, they were doing. And I had a lot of conversations with the Brazilian laboratories at the University of Sao Paulo and people like that about what they were attempting to do. Lots of contact with Cuba as well, finding out what they're doing. And the problem that you have, for instance, because of the supply chain problems, I track in African countries, lots of African countries have had enormous amounts of difficulties because of the variance and because governments have used an arithmetical approach to an exponential problem. I talk to the nurses in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean all the time. And there was a period where the nurses were sleeping in broom closets because you had a strike action going on in the health industry. And at the same time, a variant, the Delta virus flying through Jamaica, and nurses were working, 72-hour shifts at that time, trying to deal with the crisis.
outbreak,
And the problem was, they did not believe. They thought the government was doing what it needed to do. They believed the government wanted to fix the problem, and I think the same thing about Bahamian government. They want to fix the problem, but they won't listen to advice that is counterintuitive.
Yes, you're right on that.
Yeah.
If it doesn't fit a message,
Yes, absolutely.
then it's not the right message.
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And so I've had a wild time because I'm someone who's known not to care how government feels about the advice that I give.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not interested in whether it supports a political party or whether it gets you reelected and so on. My interest is the particular problem. And refreshingly, some governments have been very open about these kinds of things. Now, we've talked about the overall scale. We've talked about the supply chain problem. We've talked about some of the second, third order effects, like hunger, like the supply chain shock, like some of the failures around the world of financial institutions and companies and that kind of thing. So I was trying to get the Expo to focus on the pandemic and certain very, very important issues that are going beyond our notice. And that is the differences between countries with their entry requirements, whether for vaccine passports, which I said would come.
Yep.
And what I think is going to be health as identity. And just if you allow me a little bit of philosophy right there, in social systems, information is fractal. You always know a part of the information, not all. So we speculate or we forecast or whatever it is, predict on the balance of the information. The problem with that is if you're Canada, you say, okay, we need to protect our country. And so vaccines are going to be our strategy. We have a vaccine strategy and everybody's in the hospital.
That's right.
Okay, that didn't work. All right, let's go to testing then. Well, we're going to do random testing because we can't afford to test everybody on the regular basis. I'm sorry, the world needs 40 billion tests. There's just no way around it, right? Okay, they say, no, we don't have that. So, that advice doesn't mean anything because we can't. Okay, then you have to develop a fractal management system where you have enough sufficient overlap in your system to be able to test people strategically and be able to gather data from that. But that takes time to organize. And if you didn't do like South Korea, Singapore, Bhutan, Vietnam, and Taiwan at the beginning, that's say January 2020, you're in lag time. You're constantly
really trying to
catching up.
catch up.
You can't,
Exactly.
absolutely. So this is
And that's what we've been doing.
it's a
Really.
big problem.
Yep.
So I said, let's discuss in Dubai a global standard for immigration entry insofar as health standards is concerned. Let's protect the individual, because I'm afraid that some country is going to say, I can't take this fractal information, this see through a glass darkly, half knowing, half believing. As St. Paul said, we can't work like that. That's the basis of economics, but we can't work like that.
That's so true.
I need perfect information. What is blockchain? Blockchain is perfect information.
Yes.
But what do you load on the blockchain? Oh, I know, your complete health data. That would make me feel comfortable. If I'm Canada or I'm New Zealand or I say, okay, I need to have your complete health data.
As an individual.
As an individual.
So now you're talking about privacy
Yes.
issues, medical data.
Absolutely.
That is now safely, or we would hope,
Yes.
safely on a blockchain system.
Well, the problem with that is whether it's safely on a blockchain or not, other decisions are going to be made of that because it's going to be convenient to other individuals, other institutions like insurance companies, banks.
I don't know if I like that one.
But the world is ambling towards an information singularity.
That's true.
Right? And an information singularity is where when you go to a counter or when you log in online, all the data about you is right there, right? And the danger of that is, as you say, the constitutional issues problem. You've seen the testimony before Congress about
With Facebook. Yes.
Here's the problem. You've got an algorithm that knows you better than your family.
That's right.
Right? But that algorithm also knows another billion people. All right. So Facebook is the biggest country in the world. It's the biggest psychotherapy session in the world, in human history. All right. Because what Facebook is aiming for is your limbic system. Right. So you post something, they want you to have a dopamine rush.
That's right.
Right. So immediately the algorithm locks you into a group of people and they all say, yay, super smart, our friend, da 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 da.
So true.
So the world has been reconfigured from countries in which people have different ideas to locking together people from different countries with the same ideas. Right? With the same ideas, creating a difficulty, as my colleague Tristan Harris said before Congress and on Chris, I can't remember his last name, the fellow who comes on before Rachel Maddow.
I know you.
Yeah. And so Tristan Harris was on last night, and I spoke to him before he went on, and he was saying that, look, you can't have democracy with this. So what is all this? So we've been talking about a lot of things. What does all this mean? Your pandemics in an age of exponential social media technology produces an information crash. Basically, it corrupts the information ecology. Governments can't get policy positions out there because social media can answer immediately that your policy options are undermined.
Hold that thought.
Yes.
Because that's going to be a big nugget. I don't want us to go too far. We have to take a commercial break. When we come back, more with Dr. Gilbert Morris in studio. We're talking about COVID-19, but not just COVID-19, the effects of it on the economy and the supply shock side of it as well. We will be back right after this.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
You're listening to the Guardian News Network. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Taylor Ferguson. Here's what's making news. Thank you for tuning in.
Former Prime Minister and Opposition Leader Dr. Gilbert Morris says the FNM's attorneys are looking into conflict of interest claims that have emerged after Prison Chief Charles Murphy was placed on administrative leave and 2 deputy commissioners who National Security Minister Wayne Munro's law firm represented were reinstated. Munro has denied there was a conflict of interest. Prime Minister Philip Davis said yesterday he would speak with Munro on the matter. A new building on the way for the Road Traffic Department. That's from Transport Minister JoBeth Colby Davis. Following a tour of the department's offices at the National Stadium today, the minister said she's very concerned about working conditions.
The controller office looks like a cupboard, and he takes in persons and has various meetings there. That's a representation of the government, and it's not a really good one. Since I spoke to some of the staff, they were in these conditions for many years. There's obviously a smell coming from some of the carpet because there's cracks in the building that when it rains really hard, it wets the carpet, and these persons are still required to come in to work and provide the service we need so that there's any backlog.
The Ministry of Health reporting 4 new COVID-19 related deaths, all residents of Grand Bahama and all females, ages 42, 61, 67, and 88. They died between September 22nd and October 3rd. According to the ministry, 1 death that was previously under investigation is now reclassified as a COVID-19 related death. There are 3 additional deaths currently under investigation. The total number of deaths now 586. 62 deaths in total are under investigation. 60 new cases recorded on Wednesday, 48 on New Providence, 3 on Grand Bahama, 6 on Eleuthera, and 1 each for Exuma, Andros, and Mayaguana. And that's what's making news. I'm Taylor Ferguson. AP News is coming up next.
Coronavirus update. I'm Ed Donahue with an AP News Minute. Stocks finished higher. The Dow up 337 points. Near Chicago.
These requirements work.
President Biden is at a construction site run by Clayco, a large building firm, which is announcing a new vaccinate or test requirement for its workforce.
More people are getting vaccinated. More lives are being saved. Let's be clear. When you see headlines and reports of mass firings and hundreds of people losing their jobs, look at the bigger story.
The president says vaccine requirements work.
Not only increase in vaccination rates, but to help send people back to work.
In the coming weeks, more than 100 million Americans will be subject to vaccine requirements ordered by President Biden. If regulators give the okay, kids 5 to 11 could soon start getting coronavirus shots. Pfizer filed the request with the Food and Drug Administration. Pfizer already announced a lower dose of its vaccine worked and appeared safe in a study of young people. I'm Ed Donahue.
This is Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas.
Baja sugar, sugar, let's get sugary. Softer, smoother, and amazing skin. Oh, Baja sugar, sugar, we're the sugar ladies. Giving you skin soft as a baby's. Goodbye hair, we'll take good care of you.
Come visit us at Baja Retreat Spa on East Bay Street. Contact us at 323-6711 or visit us online at www.baharetreat.com.
Attention all students in grade 4 through 12. Do you think you know about money? Well, the Central Bank of the Bahamas is giving you a chance to prove it and win cash in the 2021 Get Money Smart Bahamas Video Essay Competition. Can you tell us why you think the Bahamian economy is an ideal model for digital financial services? If you can, just produce a short video submission before October 22nd and show us you are money smart. Cash prizes will be given in various age categories, but you must get your parents' permission to enter. For more information, visit www.getmoneysmartbahamas.com or see our post on social media.
It's the hit back with the hash of black. It's the hit back with the hash of black. It's the hit back with the hash of black. It's the hit back with the hash of black.
And we're back. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black, Professor Gilbert Morris joining us in studio. And listen, if you're just tuning in, I don't want you to miss any part of this. The conversation, of course, one of the things that I love to do, let's deep dive into the economy. I love deep diving into the economy, understanding the machinations of it. Things that affect us in the pocketbooks and directly into our pockets is all about this economy. And it starts from the micro to the macro to the micro levels of the economy. But the global systems, the global economic variables affect home. And COVID has done a number on the effects, the total effects of all the world's economies. But we are finding ourselves in an even more peculiar position.
Well,
and you were saying something really deep about how it's.
Well, I was talking a little bit more about the impacts of an exponential phenomena like COVID-19 and what it means for the information ecology and the ability of governments to basically formulate policy and communicate with its citizenry, because its citizenry now does not necessarily regard the government as the authority.
That's right.
And they're receiving their authority, what they believe is authoritative, from social media. And in social media, you can create synthetic knowledge where people think they're seeing something, but they're not. And that's the nature of the limbic stimulation of social media and the algorithms. The purpose of it is not to reveal any truth to you.
No.
It is limbic stimulation. And here's the thing.
And limbic stimulation meaning really mental stimulation.
Yeah. That it's all
like gratification.
No, they've done studies and control groups on this. They know what they're doing. And but to some extent, and I was talking to someone this morning about this, I think that Mark Zuckerberg is terrified by what he created because he doesn't know how to control it, and nobody does. So he's testifying before Congress. I can tell you, when he gets off stage, some congressman comes to him and says, "You notice I didn't mash you up. Listen, my campaign is next month."
Yeah.
And my opponent is already using social media, and so the algorithm notices, can pick you out and surgically micro target and pick other people out who have a gradient of extreme views. So not just a flat view, but a gradient. Why the gradient? Because the gradient is the extremity. As the views become more extreme, the politics becomes more polarized. Now you have to say the worst possible things to get attention. And then it all feeds back into each other in a feedback loop, and then it goes viral.
How does this affect us? You see, because that's where I want us to get to, even in this.
It makes us certain in our stupidity. This is what it does. And you hear people saying, well, I research. What the devil you mean you research? Well, I see people posting studies online. You have to understand, no scholar just posts a study. The question is, who did the study? By whom were they funded? What are the assumptions in the study? Are those assumptions consistent with the field narrative in that particular discipline? So do you have access to all of that? You can't be, and no study is complete. If you read the New England Journal of Medicine, the last paragraph of every paper is a list of the things that the paper did not cover.
Yes.
Right? And why you can't make assumptions about what things mean, because they're all what we say it's an inverted U curve, that there's an arc to the truth of it. In this circumstance, it's true, but it falls off. We call it a deflationary truth. It's true at a certain level, at a certain point in time, like water boils at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, at sea level. And then when you cover it, then that changes. And then you raise it 25 feet, that changes it, and so on.
That's
so
right.
You can't make a straight statement.
That's right.
Right? Because there are conditionalities. And we are people not used to conditionalities. Our churchification means that we like certain knowledge, and we like to say, I don't care what anybody says.
That's right. This is what it is.
Okay. People like that are very susceptible to limbic manipulation by social media algorithms.
So true.
Absolutely. And this makes it very, very difficult to get a clear, comprehensive policy. And this is why China created its own internet. It's not so when you are in China, you don't see, Facebook and
But that's
Amazon.
communism, though. That's to control your
but
society.
Well, it could be for that, and it could be just so Estonia has created its own internet, right?
But Estonia doesn't behave as China.
Yeah,
does.
but my point is, you can create your own internet with different intentions, different objectives. But the key thing about creating your own internet, of course, we sold BTC for tuppence, so we can't do anything about it. But the thing about creating your own internet is, first, you protect the vital privacy information of your citizenry by keeping it in the country. I'm going to assume that if you check the databases where Bahamians and where our private
National
information is
insurance.
concerned, it's not in the country, right?
Well,
in
we figured out some of that.
yeah, in many cases, not in the country. Okay, well, if large, we call them digital leviathans, large technology corporations, and the four largest ones are more powerful than 80% of the world's countries. If they have your data,
then what do you do?
then what? How do governments
You're not
compete
sovereign.
with that?
But you're not sovereign. You're not
So
protected.
I always give the example to governments that Amazon today can hire every Bahamian that is underemployed or unemployed, that has technological skills, selling, promoting, all this kind of thing, testing products, all that. Pay them by PayPal, and your sovereignty is over. You get no national insurance. You can't get national health insurance, right? They don't depend on you. You can't control them in any way. So the political control that you use jobs to control them, that doesn't function.
So the gig economy.
Yeah, they're attending university online
Yeah.
in some other country, right? They have all their accounting or whatever done in some other country online. So basically, you're emptying out the shell of the sovereign framework and leaving it with nothing. And the government just sounds like a barking dog or a meowing cat. It has no impact on significant portions or increasingly significant portions of the population. That is what we're facing. If you're not governing against that, you're wasting your time.
And so, hold on now, Doc. So now I'm trying to figure out, you have to bring it home for me, because even now, for me, when you say that and you share that, boy, that is a picture, right? But you know what's the first thing that came to my mind?
What's that?
We're not even smart enough
Right.
to fall for that trap.
Yes.
And just, you said pay through PayPal.
Right.
Many members will tell you now PayPal is the hardest thing. Good thing maybe that's why central bank won't allow us to receive.
Well, there are
PayPal.
other systems. There are other systems that you can use, and now American banks have sufficient international payment systems that you could get paid there and still have access to your funds in real time.
Oh, trust me, a lot of folks know.
Yeah. So if you live in a country with an exchange control and a peg, that's actually a very bad thing.
Now, that would be us.
Absolutely. So we've had this argument. We've seen these argument or discussions. Marla Dukaran, the former RBC economist, and a colleague of mine, and Catherine Kelly, is that her name?
Catherine
right?
Kelly.
And
Who writes an article for the
Punch, yeah.
yes.
So she has 10 steps.
I think it's dollars and cents or something.
Yeah, 10 steps to
Yes.
Bahamian collapse. And Marla Dukaran is arguing that the Bahamas is going to be in the hands of the IMF. Both of them come to the same conclusions, but they come in different ways. I think that to the extent that Marla Dukaran is referring to specific bonds, callable bonds, I think she may have overestimated the issue. But to the extent that she's talking about the issues of the peg, and that's where Catherine Kelly is really quite eloquent, I think that's right.
Explain that. Let's go to.
So the
take us
Bahamas
back.
is in a peg with the United States, a 1-to-1 peg with the dollar. The dollar has all the value. All the value.
All the value.
The Bahamian, you could have put a banana there.
The banana would have been at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
value.
Same 1-to-1. Doesn't matter. You could have said ambrosia cloth, whatever you want to.
And that's a decision done by the country,
Done by
the host
deliberate-
country.
So there's no market price for the Bahamian dollar.
Oh, nowhere on a foreign exchange will you find.
No market price for the Bahamian dollar. So when people say you could have a devaluation, this is the wrong thing to say. Don't say the dollar can be devalued because it has no
exist.
value.
Right.
If the peg breaks, the dollar will drop to a value floor. And because then it will be marked to market, right? That is the average of what anybody would take for it.
The truth of the
It
dollar.
will be the truth of its value will
Yes.
be revealed.
Yes.
All right. And I think you're talking about something, south of Jamaica.
No, man.
Yeah.
No.
So
South of Jamaica.
Yeah.
Doc, how could you?
So I think, I think so. If that were to happen, I'm not saying it's going to happen. What I am saying though, is the impact of the pandemic has been a decrease in the tourism income that and that was already residual income, because I hope most Bahamians know that the money that tourists pay to come and stay in the Bahamas never comes to the Bahamas.
No.
That goes to New Jersey.
That's right.
And to
Booking
Orlando,
agents,
right?
no,
Or Fort Lauderdale to the credit card processing agencies. That never sees the Bahamas. So what a hotel would do or a big corporation would do is deposit their money in a U.S. account in the United States and then get a rollover loan in the Bahamas in B dollars. So what's actually happening is you're increasing the number of people who are using B dollars to draw down on reserves that are diminishing. Now, I saw some report that says the reserves
Drawing down on U.S. reserves.
Right. So basically, we have a $10 billion economy that depends on about $2.5 billion in U.S. reserves. About 800 million of that is borrowed money. So you got to find new U.S. dollars to pay the interest on that 800 million. And then recently we just made a move with special drawing rights at the IMF, which is an IMF currency that you can plug into, countries can use or leverage. I've called for it to be used to do a $4.5 trillion global stimulus using SDRs, because they're convertible to any currency in the world.
SDRs
right?
What are SDRs?
Special drawing rights.
Okay.
But it's a currency, right? Every country deposits a certain amount at the IMF, and the IMF holds that.
Yep.
So it's more complex than that, but that's the basic idea. And so when you run into trouble, you can call on that, on special drawing rights. Other countries can pledge
And
special
I think that's
drawing
what we
rights for you.
did
Just recently.
Just recently.
Yeah.
200 million,
Yeah.
was it?
So that doesn't, so the reserves didn't grow. We added to the reserves. That's the thing. Growth is a organic thing, which means we have developed businesses of one kind or the other, an enterprise of one kind or the other, and people have come voting with the US dollars, and then we've been able to boost the reserves so by enterprise. Now, you say, well, we got a new government, what should they do? Everyone jumps out and says, well, foreign direct investment is the key. Again, no foreign investor, right, maybe for a short period of time, is going to risk their US dollars in the system. They're going to park their US dollars in a bank in the United States that has relationships or correspondent relationships in the Bahamas, and they're going to borrow B dollars. That's how Atlantis was done. That's how Bahamas was done. All right. And so in each of these cases, foreign direct investment is not efficient enough to drive the growth and development that we need. What you have to do is invest in and through Bahamians, so that the tourist dollar comes to actual Bahamians,
right into their homes,
right into them, and then that goes into, that's drawn up into the reserves. You fatten the reserves by
That's
doing
growth.
that. Absolutely, that's growth.
That's not borrowing.
That's
drawing
not
down,
borrowing.
no.
That's not. You also have to bring your booking centers as much as possible. The
Thank
number
you.
one
Say
thing
it
that the
again.
Bahamas government should be doing is setting up a settlement center for credit card payments and all that
Yes.
within the Bahamas, whatever that takes. Because again, that is a shot in the arm to your reserves.
Help folks understand the booking centers.
Right.
How much money do
Right.
we not make, or we are missing out of, just in booking? Because
billions
billions
of dollars. When you, as a tourism destination, we ought to have had the most advanced Expedia and Kayak and all these places
Mhm.
should have had nothing on us. But the Bahamas invented everything. I mean, we had people to people before Airbnb was anywhere on anybody's mind.
Mhm.
But we do these things, and they're quaint little political things, but we never pull a research group around them, analyze them, and say, hey, we could do fractional, renting of residential homes, and that means that every Bahamian could be in business, right? And that's how you and it's at a low tech level. It's sufficiently low tech that as many Bahamians as want to and have the discipline to could get involved. Plus, we could build an electronic system, a blockchain, and so on, where you could have registrations, bookings, and all that. And now the money is coming into Bahamian banks, into the Bahamas, these US dollars and so on.
It's huge.
And it doesn't prejudice the large hotels.
No.
All right. Doesn't prejudice the large hotels, but it develops pricing mechanisms at all levels, and it supports, extensive airlift to the Bahamas and that sort of thing. And it could lead to the development of the family
Is that difficult
islands.
to do?
It's not difficult. It's not difficult to do.
Booking centers.
No, it's not difficult. Nothing is difficult. You have to be deliberate about these things. You have to map them out sufficiently, and you have to ask yourself, and maybe you white label the technology at first, partner with somebody, and so on, and then you have a medium term agreement, and then you switch from that medium term agreement, and you put your techies to work. One of the things I would say, and I would advise this government to do, is find every competent techie in the Bahamas and employ them right now.
That's
today.
right.
I mean, like this
Right now.
afternoon. Yeah.
Right now.
And get them building. That's why it was wrong to sell BTC, because that would have been the incubator to bring those people in and say, we are going to build, because it's important to our national security, we're going to build just as Estonia is doing, as Singapore is doing, as China has done. And the future is going to be countries that have a digital moat around them to protect their internal data. And foreign policy, all of you young people who want to study foreign policy that listen to Nahaja every day, as you should, if you want to study foreign policy, study interoperability. Interoperability mechanisms that's going to be the new foreign policy that's going to be negotiated between countries. Access to each other's liberalized and harmonized access to each other's data sphere, digital sphere.
I love that you said
And
that.
so those are the kinds of things. So at the moment now, we are looking at a world in which the pandemic is the complete opposite of tourism. Complete opposite. And I told a large hotel here when they tried to open in July, because I said that COVID is forever. There's going to be no tourists in 2020. You can forget it. Probably not 2021 in any appreciable way. And then you'll have waves back and forth. The US will never achieve herd immunity. And even though Biden won, I said this, I don't care who wins, Democrat, Republican, but Biden is never going to do the kind of brutal things you need to do to get your hand on this thing. And that's going to give the Republicans a chance to come back with this extremism that they have practiced, such as the governor of Florida. And when you see things like that, you say, well, why are you talking about that? We're talking about the Bahamas. Yeah, that is about the Bahamas.
That is about the Bahamas.
Because if the U.S.
can't get it together,
enters into basically a cold civil war, right, where the Supreme Court is pitted against women, the Texas legislature is pitted against Black voters, and so is Georgia, and so is this one and that one, and so on. And if you're going to have that kind of thing, and we'll see what this will look like in the midterm elections, and if Biden loses the Senate in the midterm elections, nothing is going to get done. And as I said in March of 2020, the smart Bahamian government will govern as if the United States ceased to exist.
You're so right.
And I said that, and now you're seeing it play out. And what does that mean? Does that mean the United States does not exist? No, it doesn't mean that. The attempt to govern as if it doesn't exist means that you will do more things that are self-reliant, self-dependent, independent, and you will pick the low-hanging fruit that's available from the United States, such as the wealthy persons who want to decamp out of the United States because of the social turmoil. We don't wish the United States bad. We wish they thrive and do well. They are our friend. But when we're talking about the strategy for our own country, we have to be smart about what the real opportunities are. And what the opportunities are is there are 100 million Americans retiring in the next 25 years. That has been exacerbated by COVID. That has been, and winter is coming. That has been exacerbated by COVID, by variants. It has been exacerbated by the likelihood of higher taxes, whether you think those taxes are justified or not. So if you're in the Bahamas sitting here going, well, you know, I really don't think Biden should raise taxes, or you think, I think Biden should raise taxes, that's none of your business. What is your business is, what is the net effect of either? And if the net effect is that wealthy people want to leave the United States,
that's good for us.
That's an opportunity
that's
for
good
us.
For us.
If the net effect is people become more wealthy and they want to stay in the United States, that's good for us because it's advertising for tourists. You see my point? So having the right frame of mind, and there's one more thing I would say. How does the government get itself in position to execute these kinds of strategies? You say, I've got to deal with the information ecology and the effect of social media in my country. I've got to deal with limited resources, which means I didn't prioritize to get vaccines at the front end because I had said in March of 2020, send all microbiologists, every physician or nurse who's good at chemistry, even if they got to wash Bunsen burners, send them to the 7 vaccine development centers around the world so that Bahamians can be part of the story. We didn't do that. I said when we did the competent authority, go to UOB, set up the ombudsman program, make sure you have 100 law students involved in that, reviewing the decisions of the competent authority, so you beef up the number of people in the country that have forensic constitutional knowledge. Again, all those young people walking around now, they could have had that experience for 4 years. We didn't put them in that position. I said, hire all the techies in the country, have them address the impacts of Dorian, have them address the impacts of COVID, have them build a beautiful online system for digital Bluetooth contact tracing. We didn't do that. Those things are important, not just for Bluetooth contact tracing. The same proposition you use for Bluetooth contact tracing, you have to use for education services delivery.
Interesting.
Do you understand my point? So a pandemic offers you these opportunities that comes to the front door as one thing, but enters the house as many things.
And now we're grown. We're now
we're groomed for that.
Yeah.
And so Singapore, in its constitution, I mean, Lee Kuan Yew was a Chinese aristocrat, but the difference between Lee Kuan Yew and Sir Stafford Sands, who were equally as bright as each other, is that Lee Kuan Yew could not stand ghettos in his country. So in the Constitution, they ensured that minorities were protected for a 25 to 30 year period. In the Constitution, sufficiently that Lee Kuan Yew's last cabinet had in it an Indian deputy prime minister. You understand me? Dr. Jayakumar. So when you think about that, they looked at their country. Instead of complaining and saying, oh, these people keep coming here and taking our things and so on, they built a system to keep those out who they wanted out by a certain criteria. And those who they let in, they integrated them fully in the system.
Yes.
But the migrant problem, Singapore was #1 in the world in my ranking in January of 2020. It fell to number 6 by July of 2020 for one reason. They forgot about the migrant workers.
Yes, they did. Yes. And then we had an outbreak there.
Absolutely. And what did Prime Minister Lee do? He took the stewardesses of Singapore Airlines, the most prestige. So in the public's mind, he says, I have to show this country that we're all in this together. And sometimes it's no talking. He took the stewardesses, the most prestigious company in Singapore, and he took them to the migrant center, the lowest place on the social rung. Why did he do that? For 2 reasons. Number one, it demonstrates to the country that we're prepared to put our most prestigious institutions in the center of this fight. But it also steeled the stewardesses, because when they're at 35,000 feet and people are misbehaving with COVID and all these kinds of things, they've been in the trenches, they understand, and now they're seasoned and knowledgeable and experienced and are able to do what they need to do. And now look at what's happening. Singapore and New Zealand and Cayman actually are the three models of COVID management that everyone must pay attention to.
I'm so happy you said Cayman
Right.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait, let's take a break. When we come back, more with Dr. Gilbert Morris here. We're talking about COVID, the economy, and the way forward. Someone has sent some great, sent a great text message with regard to supply chain and wanting to know, should we be bulk buying? And also, there's something else that is out there. But we'll be back. You're listening.
We should be strategically, but we should be buying strategically.
I like that. Hold your thought.
As a unit, as a national unit. And people have done this before, where they throw all their Jersey bundle in and somebody go to Miami.
Yeah.
Back one big box.
No, but not like that.
Share things up.
We'll be back. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black, Guardian Radio, 96.9 FM.
You invest in your children, your home, and your community. But are you investing in your financial future? At CFAO, we specialize in investment management, retirement planning, mutual funds, and private wealth management. Our team of experts never stops helping you plan for tomorrow. Because tomorrow begins today. Call us at 502-7010 to see what our financial advisors can do for you. CFAO. Growing wealth for future generations.
Have you heard about the COVID vaccine raffle? If you are vaccinated against COVID-19, you can enter to win amazing prizes like food store gift certificates, hotel stays, beach excursions, and so much more. Even if you are previously vaccinated, you can still enter to win. The COVID vaccine is free, safe, and protects you from severe COVID-19 infections. Don't delay. Get vaccinated today and enter to win. Visit www.bafbahamas.com to register.
You have a new text message from Scotia.
Scotiabank is adding text messaging to its communication channels to keep customers updated in quicker and safer ways. As of November 4th, Scotiabank will be using text messaging to provide notifications on the minimum payment required for your credit card and due dates. Customers may continue to access their credit card statements on Scotia Online or through our mobile banking app. Learn more by contacting customer care-bahamas at scotiabank.com or call 356-1697.
This is Guardian Radio, your station for up-to-the-minute news, intelligent, interactive, and engaging conversation. 96.9 FM.
It's the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. It's the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. It's the Hit Back with Nahaja Black. It's the Hit Back with Nahaja Black.
And we're back. You're listening to the Hit Back with Nahaja Black, Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. I've got Dr. Gilbert Morris joining us on the show. And let me see. I got some comments now. Folks are, hi, Mr. Black, please bring this gentleman on at least once a week to educate us Bahamians. That's from Tanya. She's saying hello. And someone sent a text, and I want to read that. I'll read that a little coming to the end of the show. This is important, an important question here. Question for Professor Morris is brilliant, but can he work within the framework of government's decided plan? For example, the blueprint for change. Can we work within that plan, that blueprint? And then we'll get to the text.
I don't. When I go to countries, governments invariably give me some sort of blueprint that they're working on. Mm-hmm. And usually I don't pay attention to that. I ask for the map. Give me the map and the vital statistics, all the vital numbers of your country. And that'll tell me whether you have set the foundation right to be having a blueprint of some kind. And what will happen is, and what I do, because I believe in matching. So if you have a blueprint, sit it over there. I'm going to engage in this exercise. And if I end up where your blueprint is,
all right,
then your blueprint is right. But if I don't end up where your blueprint is, then we have to have a discussion. But if you're so, insistent that your blueprint be followed, I don't know whether you've done the foundational work.
I agree.
To set the right foundation in place to end up at that blueprint.
To even get those results.
And you should welcome the exercise where I'm going to do an analysis to be able to see if I end up where your blueprint
But that's
is.
the only way. That's to me, that's the only way that
So
you even get close.
It's proof of concept.
That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want the concept to work,
right,
then you should welcome that proof of concept. Let's get to a call and then we'll get back to where we were. Caller, you're on the hit back. Welcome.
Yes, Nahaja Black, how you doing? And Dr. Gilbert Morris.
My good friend.
Johnson.
Hello there. How are you?
Just allow me maybe 60 seconds, 120 seconds at the most. Because first, let me, right where he starts, right, and you asked a very important question, and I love his answer, because the blueprint that has been established, what I see it as one of the most extensive data collection process that has to begin for it to be have any type of viability. And I'm talking about the internal data and being able to benchmark it against the external data that is ever changing daily in the global marketplace.
Right.
And I mean, it's a huge task. It's because essentially, I know what the words say, but I'm saying that the current administration has a technological miracle to achieve. Coming to that, we'll talk about that later. My second point, I think, Dr. Morris, I think the most important aspect, and I think you should put emphasis on, is the fact that you spoke about this data sovereignty and data privacy, and the fact that a foreign policy, which could be one of the first in the world, should be considered to be established on it.
Right.
The Bahamas Constitution, when you look at it from a digital mindset, is the only place in the world that I'm aware of that can provide constitutional data privacy and constitutional data sovereignty. And so when we look at establishing a data industry built on that footprint, we could actually become the Qatar, how Qatar uses influence rather than getting into the fight. We can become the Qatar of protecting individuals' data, where even when you talk about building privacy, kind of like giving a new identity that we can verify, kind of like how we do the deed poll, but it is accepted globally to be established, and it would also give individuals the opportunity to monitorize the actual data they create, as well as protect the data even from a medical standpoint, and not knowing who they are. But I think nowhere else in the world this is possible. I've talked about it for almost a decade before most people knew the difference between data and data. And that's a joke there, but and I think it's possible. I think it's time for us to embrace the future as opposed to building on the past.
Yeah.
And I hope that an opportunity is taken at this pivotal point in our time that we actually have a conversation of change that is necessary for us to progress in this new reality we live in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff, yeah.
See Alan Johnson
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there in
that's
Grand
my brother,
Bahama.
man.
Let me ask you, Doc. Someone says, what is the recommendation to survive the next 3 years? Bulk buying, crypto, what? And we're talking about also with that in mind of this supply shock as well.
When you decide to optimize to manage a problem, you have to ask, what is the mechanism for managing complex systems, right? Complex systems where components of it that are opposite to your well-being are exponential.
So break that down.
Right. So you have a virus, you have the impacts of the virus, non-medical impacts beyond the pandemic into economic, financial and social and so on. So our education system, for instance,
Of course.
right? So if I asked a parent right now, do you have a sense of what the next 6 months will bring in our education system? You can't really answer,
No.
right? Do you have any sense of what advantages your child will have? Or is it something where we patch together to survive?
That's it. It's a
Right?
patchwork.
Why should that be the case when the top 5 countries in the world have advanced their education systems during the pandemic. What are they doing that we're not doing? So you have that now. So you come into office, you got a prime minister, you got a young deputy prime minister, you got all these people in government. The structure of our government are a series, generally speaking, is a series of plantation divisions where each minister is in his own silo, right? That can't work in this situation.
No. It cannot work.
What needs to happen when you're dealing the same way military command is organized, high-end military, and I'm talking about deployed military command. So like the Supreme Allied Commander during the Second World War. So you're on. It's not
on the site. Yep.
It's a hot situation, right? You have to have a directorate, a war room. That war room has to gather information and analyze that information, what is called spectrum information that covers the entire spectrum.
Yeah.
No
It's
matter
not a
what
9 to 5 job.
No matter what the ministry is.
Yes.
Then you have to say, hey, minister, organize your ministry to run the day-to-day, and then also organize a team in your ministry to receive this information from the war room, right? So if you're the Ministry of Health, you organize to run health facilities and all that. That's the basic stuff. But all the big plans, like we're going to develop national health, you got to forget about all that. Because now it's a question of survival and getting beyond the survival benchmark to thriving. So out of the war room comes an analysis about, okay, we need our health system to look like this. So the Minister of Health has to be available to receive that information from the war room and then get that stood up right away. Then you say, well, to do that, the Ministry of Works has to do these sorts of things. So the Ministry of Work the Ministry of Health becomes the client of the Ministry of Works, and then you work there.
Yeah.
And you say, if we achieve this, we'll be able to do this in the Ministry of Tourism. So then tourism has its mechanism built on that. That comes out of the war room as well to be strategic. Then you say, if tourism achieves that in the Ministry of Finance, we'll be able to track this sort of thing. So you see, it's not the old traditional system anymore.
It's one.
Where some ministers have no idea what's going on in the other one's ministry. It's manage your ministry to a baseline of efficiency and be available from the intelligence from the war room to what we call steel man your industry towards a strategy. And if we don't take that urgent approach, right? So people are saying things like, we have 4 years and we have 5 years.
We don't have that.
We don't have any of that because if Biden loses the midterm elections, the U.S. is going to become inhospitable. Not that I want Biden to win. I'm just saying the position of Mitch McConnell. So if they win the Senate outright,
that's it. We're in trouble.
And the numbers in the Congress are shortened so that Democrats don't have the large advantage. You have a stalemate in the U.S. government. And for us, that's not very good with variants, right? And a pandemic raging, right? That's not a good thing. What we have to be doing, how do you deal with that? You can't deal with that from one ministry plodding along. Oh, we have some investors coming in. No. You have to invert it. Take 10,000 acres, master plan it, put a team together, send them around the world. Go get your skyline. Don't sit in your office and wait for someone to define your skyline. That's the kind of energy I'm talking about.
Doc, you remember you said something to me years ago, and you brought this to my attention. Right. And you said every really successful touristic destination has something that is their benchmark, something. Yes. So I always think about it. Paris with the Eiffel Tower,
absolutely.
New York with the Statue of Liberty, Toronto with its CN Tower.
Absolutely.
You know, and you mentioned this years ago. You said we wait, but we should go out and say,
and people
create
should,
a competition.
Absolutely. And one of the things about turning tourism thinking around, if you go to Thailand, the Thai don't make any effort to make Thailand more hospitable. To
No,
you.
they don't.
The Japanese don't limit their Japanese-ness culture to make it acceptable to you. You go to Japan and you adopt Japanese behavior.
Yeah.
There are 10 million people walking in Tokyo. Nobody looks at you and nobody bumps into you. So you adopt that posture, because if you go around bumping into people, uncomfortable things might happen. You become Japanese. You go to Jamaica, you go to the Terra Nova Hotel, you have sweet bread and fish soup and things for breakfast. You have ground provisions and these sorts of things. They speak with a accent, they play their own music, and you have to say, so what's that saying?
Yeah.
So what's that about? So tourism is make the lives of your people beautiful, prosperous, and culturally rich. Then invite the tourists to come and enjoy that with your people.
Let's get some of these callers right now. Caller, you're on the hit back. Thanks for holding.
Yes, good afternoon, Ms. Black. Good afternoon, Mr. Gilbert Morris.
Hey, how you doing, my brother?
Yeah, I'm great. I've learned a lot, and so, you enlighten me some more on the supply chain issue. But, the thing is, I'm afraid that this is a construct because Mr. Gates is on the internet discussing this about a year before the book COVID-19 and the Great Reset came out.
Right.
So I first learned about supply chain from about last year. The Great Reset came out last year,
right.
June 2020. And it has some conjecture, but I see that most of the stuff in the book is actually coming true.
Right.
So this supply chain issue seems to be a construct to drive up prices driven by China. And so I just would like for you to comment. But the thing is, I've looked into it. The longshoremen in the States, they earn about $70,000 to $85,000 without overtime. So I was trying to find out if the labor shortages are fast, because the reasons they're giving, and you're looking at what's going over there, it's a farce. It's just to drive up global economies. And then the fact is, Mr. Gilbert Morris, that they knew that or let's say the United States is the reserve currency of the world. So hence they know what this pandemic will have on third world regions as far as tourism. So they know this will dry up our reserves, and they know the economic hardship that would induce. So no third world leader has prepared themselves. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Let's comment on that, because they knew this for a long time. This is in the book, The Great Reset. It came out in 2020. That means
I'm fully familiar with it. And, look, global infrastructure is the supply chain is all the infrastructure in the world that gets product from one place to the other, right? So that's everything from air cargo to ships to telecommunication lines to trade finance, all these sort of warehousing, all these sorts of things. These are all part of the global system. That system has different levels. So during the pandemic, the early part of the pandemic, cruise ships sent everybody home. Cargo ships sent everybody home. One of the biggest issues that people don't know about cargo ships is that they're almost magnets for low wage labor, hard labor that, you get people from, these sorts of, Guatemala and Greece and, all these sorts of people struggling. So they go home. Now, reaggregating those people into the system is difficult. The financing model to drive that system is very difficult. Different countries having different entry requirements and so on, having different capacities and resources. There are poor countries in the world that are central in the resource chain. So there are like 5 bottleneck places in the world: the Macala Straits near Singapore with Singapore trade, Djibouti in the Gulf of Aden, and the Suez Canal, Panama Canal, the Straits of Gibraltar. These are all bottleneck areas. But those countries aren't necessarily wealthy, and the people who are working in those areas aren't necessarily people who are paid high wages and that sort of thing. And many of them are migrants who are working for, less than minimum wage.
Yeah.
And some of those countries have no minimum wage. So the system itself is held up by a company. So there was a 60 minutes program talked about airplane maintenance. So something like 60% of airplane maintenance now is done in Mexico. Lots of new mistakes. So once before, the airlines used to have, remember, airlines don't own the planes anymore. It's large corporations, investment companies own the
Oh, I didn't
planes,
know
and
that.
they absolutely. And so many of these airlines now, they have, and these airline companies, they have management systems and maintenance systems in places like Mexico. So if those places don't have the vaccine, those places don't have resources, those places
That's your
don't
labor
have-
force.
This is your labor force, and then this
Fascinating.
slows down the
Yeah.
chain. But then think about it. At the same time, if you have people saying university towns are collapsing, large investment funds that run real estate and so on, they're seeing their places being emptied. PwC just told 40,000 people they can work from home. They only did that because their leases were up, and instead of going back into a leasing, they said no, that goes straight to the bottom line. Let people work from home, and then 40,000 people said yes, okay, okay. So all those offices, it's not just the investment company; it's the pension fund companies that invest in those.
That's right.
You
That's
understand what I'm
right.
saying?
So now
All
this
the
is really
investment
causing a
funds,
lot
all
of
the
shock.
portfolio money that's in those, that makes it difficult. Then when you have a destruction of demand because of high unemployment, all these municipal bonds and all these sorts of things, these all have to be renegotiated and so on. So it creates a problem across the world that complex and complicated systems are abutting each other and creating higher levels of exponential complexity that no government or sets of governments in the world have addressed appropriately.
Let's get this final call, but then I want you to take it home for us
Right.
on what we can expect now with the supply
Absolutely.
chain issue.
Yeah.
Caller, you're on the show, on the air. Thank you for holding.
Thank you, Nahaja. Doc, man, you firing. I want to go quickly on three
Yeah.
points if you can address them for me.
Right.
There seemed to be a recent release that leaders around the world are hiding money. And I believe this money that they're hiding.
The Pandora Papers, yeah.
Well, I was going to say Pandora box. You know what I mean? And this money could be used to assist citizenry. I mean,
Yeah.
why can't? Okay, that's number one. I guess you'll find a way to get that money.
Yes.
Because I believe you may have some locals doing the same.
Yeah.
The second thing is, and this is where leadership comes in. We have these electric vehicles that are going to be released and unleashed. And you're going to have no need for gas anymore. Where's gas stations are going to go? Which leader we have now who's contemplating this fact? These parts stores. Look at what's going to happen worldwide. There's going to be no these mechanics.
Right.
Look, so you see the downtrend there, right?
Yes.
Now, my third question I want you to expand on is this. The drug world is about $300 billion a year. The Forex market is $7 trillion a day. I want to know, why is it that we're not teaching these children from primary school support and resistance, and you know the rest,
Yes.
and how to enter and how to exit with profit,
Right.
and to have to join that 1% club? Why aren't we focusing on that?
Yeah.
Different types of education.
So those three things, Doc, real quick, I'd love to hear your response. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Very quickly, what's really important to notice is that the governments of the world, the Pandora Papers have come out and they've say they expose certain things. Now, I'm going to say that I'm not a fan of this, largely because they acquired these documents as a cybercrime.
Mhm.
And at the same time that we're condemning Putin for interfering with elections, we have journalists stealing private data and giving the impression, it's bad for us because they're giving the impression
That we are harboring.
that just to have your money in one of our jurisdictions is already a crime.
That's right.
And that's,
And
not,
that's
true.
not true.
Right.
Demonizing our jurisdictions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Having said that, there are governments and government officials around the world who have been exceptionally naughty in the way that they
Made that sound so not as bad.
yeah, well, they've had their hand, both hands in the cookie jar, I told you the future is about perfect information. Every transaction you make, and I said this at my Cambridge lecture in 1999 about the blacklisting. And I told the audience, your Dame Sawyer was there in Cambridge, at Jesus College, Cambridge University, with Osada Bay and a couple of other people.
Oh, wow.
And I said at that time to the audience, in the future, there will be a technology in which government will know every single transaction you make, and it'll be confirmed, and there'll be no hiding or anything like that.
Blockchain.
So
you were ahead of your time.
That I didn't think of blockchain, but that's the point I was making.
And I would love for you to elaborate more on those questions, but I need to ask you this before we go, and we only have about 4 minutes.
Okay.
What does this supply side shock, the supply chain shock, mean for the average everyday Bahamian consumer?
In a country where you import 98% of what you consume, it means everything, because you don't control the supply chain, and yet you have to pay for it. So the smart thing, we talked about how you have to have a war room. Everybody run their ministry at a baseline of efficiency for all the basic things that need to be done.
That's right.
And leave room for creativity so you could receive the intelligence from the war room and execute, right? So in the same way, we should be meeting with wholesalers and retailers and big food stores and that kind of thing, and trying to figure out how we manage these sorts of things. In Turks and Caicos, I tried something once. Turks and Caicos is next to Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic is 11 million people and like 25 million tourists. Turks and Caicos is, 3 cousins trying to be a country, and I'm cousin to all 3 of them, right? So my point was, you'll never develop the economies of scale. No point in sitting around this room talking about how we could reduce the cost of imports for food. What we should do is go to the Dominican Republic, bundle with one of the big food stores, right? So they order another 5 containers a month.
Put it on their receipt.
And we pay them cost plus, 10% or something like that.
That's excellent.
And now we're getting their buying power.
That's right.
Right? For 14,000 people. That's the kind of thinking that you have to have. Loose, open, swift thinking that you have to have.
Good.
The last point I would say is, in terms of economic structure, Singapore did something very unusual. Norway as well, Estonia as well, but I'll just stick to Singapore for this point. And the Bahamas is in a better position to do what Singapore did. And what they did is they said, hey, we are going to turn the country into a generator function for domestic prosperity. So when we bring in foreign investors, we're going to set up a sovereign fund. So all the buildings that they rent, they're actually renting from the sovereign fund, which means they're renting from the citizens of the people of Singapore.
So we're not selling away everything.
So we're not. People aren't coming because the government of Singapore owns 90% of all real estate, 85% of all rental property.
Isn't that something?
Under the sovereign fund. Right. And one of the interesting things there is, if you look at all the processes, the electronic mainframe, the buildings, they have 147 corporations. My colleague Ted Tan is the head of this for Temasek. 140 corporations, 110 of which have a market cap of over $1 billion. 110 of the sovereign funds corporations have a market cap of about $110 billion, $1 billion dollars. So Singapore has found a way to say, what we first done is structured our economy in such a way that whatever happens on this landscape, it's cha-ching for the citizen.
I love it.
Do you see my point?
I love it.
So the country is an iPad of prosperity for its citizenry.
You know what? We have to do something else. Man, listen, it's amazing how quickly 2 hours goes, right? Dr. Gilbert Morris, one of the things I would love, we come back again, and I want us to talk about the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Right, absolutely.
You have been writing about the architecture of a Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Yeah, I wrote it for Turks and Caicos.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and now here we are with one that needs a lot of work.
Right.
And a Ministry of Natural Resources. So let's do that.
Right.
We got to go.
Absolutely.
Dr. Gilbert Morris, thank you so much.
Thank
You're
you,
listening.
audience. It's always wonderful to be back home. And
always.
talking to people. Yes.
We got to go. But listen, everyone, thank you so much. You're listening to The Hit Back with Nahaja Black Guardian Radio 96.9 FM. Dr. Gilbert Morris, love you, Doc. We'll see you guys tomorrow. We're out.
Cheerio.
Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, Nassau, Bahamas. This is Guardian Radio.
Good evening, Bahamas. You're listening to the Guardian News Network. I'm Taylor Ferguson. Here is your evening report. It is Thursday, October 7th, 2021. Thank you for tuning in. Ahead of tonight's Free National Movement Central Council meeting,